Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, 6 Steps to Volunteer Management Success. Thank you so much for joining me today to talk all things volunteering. I am going to wait a few moments to enable others who might not have joined as yet to jump on the line and take part in today's conversation. Just a little bit of housekeeping while we do wait for those few to join us. There will be an opportunity at the end of this morning's conversation to ask some questions. So you will see in your panel on the right-hand side there the option to list some questions. Please feel free to ask those questions as they come to you, to pop while you're hot, as the saying goes, and I will get around to answering those questions at the end of this morning's webinar. This is the volume that I will be speaking at throughout this morning, so please take a moment to adjust your settings so that you're able to hear me and so that you are comfortable listening to my thoughts and my perspective on volunteering for the next little while. We will be sending out a recording of today's webinar along with our white paper. The white paper goes into a little bit more detail around some of the concepts I'm going to be talking about today, and also includes an infographic which runs through those 6 steps to volunteer management success. So, given that we've now enabled a few moments to lapse, hopefully those that were intending on joining us have had the chance to do so. So let's leap in. A little bit about myself before we do start. So my name is Laura Goddard and I'm the head of our volunteer solutions team over here at LEAP. Our Volunteer Solutions team has been providing support to volunteer involving organisations since 2010. And during that time, we have assisted organisations to recruit, train, retain and recognise their volunteers in a variety of ways. We've been incredibly lucky to work with a really diverse range of organisations, and have had the pleasure of meeting volunteers from all walks of life who are looking to get something quite unique out of their volunteering experience. I've been in my role with LEAP for the past 2.5 years, prior to which I had the privilege of acting as a volunteer with a number of organisations, and that included leading the New South Wales branch of an entirely youth-run volunteer organisation called Oak Tree. I was very, very privileged to be able to work with like-minded peers during that role and throughout all of my various volunteering experiences. So I can see both sides of the coin. I have participated in a range of volunteering activities. I know what it feels like to be effectively managed as a volunteer and to be perhaps not so effectively supported. And in the role that I'm working in now, I'm also seeing from an organisation's perspective what is really important and what are those key concepts that we need to be thinking about in our engagement with volunteers. So volunteering in all of its facets is something that I'm incredibly passionate about. And hopefully that is something that will come across this morning, and that passion is something that I'll be able to share with you all today. I think that right now is a particularly poignant moment to be talking about volunteerism, because the reality is that the face of volunteering is changing, and it's changing in a number of ways. So this morning I'm going to share my thoughts and my observations of what is happening in the volunteering sector. And I'm also going to look at what we can be doing as a sector to collectively rise to meet some of those challenges. in essence, I'm asking the question, how can we as volunteer managers and volunteer involving organisations be successfully engaging volunteers and running knockout programs that meet the needs of our clients and communities and enable us to do great work, but which support our volunteers at the same time and value the contributions that they're making to our work? So let's take a moment to have a look at what the Australian volunteering landscape currently looks like. For the first time in a number of years, volunteer rates are declining. We've seen in data put forward by the ABS that volunteer rates have dropped from 36.2% of the population in 2010 to 30.9% of the population in 2014. This is quite significant, and while what we're looking at there is really only people who identify as being formal volunteers, so people who perhaps recognise that the work that they do is within an organisation and contributes to the missions or goals as an organisation. Still, what we're seeing there and what's being recognised is that less people are volunteering. A couple of factors that are potentially contributing to that is that our population is ageing. The median age has risen during the period listed there, 1994 to 2014, an increase of 4 years during that period. We know that for a lot of us, our traditional volunteers or the people that we often rely on to fulfill volunteer roles that we have are people that have potentially retired, looking to give back to the community, looking to share their skills. So what we're seeing is that the population group in that area is aging, so we're seeing less numbers in that demographic of our volunteers. And what we're wanting to encourage, or what I'd like to suggest we're wanting to encourage, is more of our youth and population to be engaging in volunteering. And I think what young people are looking to get from volunteering is quite different for what recently retired people are looking to gain through their volunteer experience. So we've got less people volunteering, and we've also got a diverse volunteer group volunteering. We've also got a community and a society increasingly becoming more digitised. A lot of our government services are moving online. A lot of us are using digital platforms, social media, databases to capture information. And so in this digital age, what we're seeing is a rise of online volunteering, a rise in people wishing to engage with opportunities through that digital platform. And that is quite a rapidly changing environment. So one of the challenge for us as volunteer involving organisations is to keep pace with that and to provide opportunities for our volunteers to engage with that digital world. Underpinning all of this, I think, is also the increasing professionalisation of the volunteering space. The fact that right now I'm speaking to a group of volunteer management professionals is really evidence of that. And while our roles offer structure and support to volunteers who work within our communities, the increasing amount of red tape that can sometimes come with that can be prohibitive for some seeking to engage with volunteering. So the challenge is for us as volunteer managers to balance those formal processes that we need to have in place, but also to have the adaptability and the flexibility to engage with volunteers and enable them to come and work with us in a way that recognises their skills and their strengths. So really, when we boil it down to what the crux of the nature of the volunteering sector is at the moment, what we're looking at is, as volunteer managers, a potentially smaller pool of people who have the right skills, the right capacity, and the time and the willingness to meet the volunteer roles that we need filled. So our challenge as a volunteering sector really is to adapt and to be able to change with this rapidly changing environment. And as we all know, often to do that with fewer resources, both human and financial. So to bring all of that back to our key question, how can we as volunteer managers be successfully engaging volunteers and running knockout programs that rise to meet that challenge? For me, it really comes down to putting our volunteers front and centre of what we do and truly integrating volunteerism into the work that we do. The 6 steps that I'm going to be looking at throughout the remainder of our webinar this morning are what I would like to suggest a bit of a roadmap to bringing volunteers into the front and centre of what you do and truly integrating volunteerism into the way that you work within your organisation. So we're going to break these down and look at each step one by one. I'm going to post some questions, hopefully provide some food for thought for you to take back to your organisation, and provide a few tips along the way as to how I think these steps can potentially be integrated into the work that you do with your volunteers. So, step 1, truly and openly value volunteering. What I mean by this is to make volunteering the reason why you involve volunteers, not the answer to a problem you need solved. Volunteers contribute immeasurable benefits to our organisations, which we're aware of. We know that they help us to meet clients' needs or to better serve our communities, and we know that they assist us to run our organisation or our administration more effectively as well. But I'd like to ask, to what extent do we think of our volunteers as a means to an end? How many times have you, as a volunteer manager, recruited a volunteer to fit a particular type of role that you need filled? A few questions to ask yourself. How do we report on the impact that our volunteers make? Do we do so regularly? And do we do so in a way that conveys not only the perhaps statistical or numerical impact that volunteers have within our organisation, but which displays the human and the emotional impact and benefit that volunteers bring to our services? Are volunteers thanked and recognised and engaged with at all levels throughout the organisation? Does my board know who our volunteers are, and are they able to engage with them and talk about the achievements that our volunteers have made throughout their time with us? How do we close the gap between paid staff and volunteers? Is there a hierarchy there that can be softly broken down to ensure that volunteers feel comfortable engaging with paid staff and vice versa? Being able to bring volunteers and paid staff together for opportunities to train together or provide input and feedback into the way that the organisations are going can be such a fantastic way to ensure that volunteers truly feel like they are a valued part of what your organisation is seeking to achieve. So a few tips or ideas as to how you could bring, and as I say, truly and openly value volunteering into the forefront of your organisation, is to consider the reasons why and how your volunteers add value and create opportunities to share these regularly. Stories can be such a powerful way of doing that, as I mentioned before, to bring that human and that emotional connection of what your volunteers are doing into your organisation as a whole. Look beyond just the numbers and the figures, but think about times and places where volunteers have had a huge impact either on your organisation internally or on your community at large. And I think creating opportunities to bring, as I said, staff and volunteers together regularly to share those stories can be such a powerful way of creating that shared buy-in. And I'd encourage you to think of ways to do this that happen on a regular occasion. Many of us, I'm sure, create opportunities for staff and volunteers to engage at, say, the annual Christmas party or National Volunteer Week events. But how can you be creating those opportunities in a more spontaneous nature that brings staff and volunteers together on a more regular basis to share those stories and share in the success that each brings to your team? Step number 2, let volunteers steer the ship. What we're thinking about here is shifting the focus from I need a volunteer to do XYZ to asking the question, what can you as a volunteer bring to our organisation? What skills or interests or passions could you bring into the work that you do to have that transformative effect on our community? Often when we bring volunteers on board, we tend to sit in the first example there. We have a role that we need fulfilled. We recruit a volunteer that has the availability and the skills and the interests that match. We slot them in, provide an induction, and then we communicate with them and tell them what we need them to achieve in their volunteer role. We probably talk about their rights and responsibilities and let them know that they have avenues to communicate with us as an organisation. But do we involve them at the heart of that conversation? Do we engage them in actually outlining what their rights and responsibilities can be within their role? Letting volunteers steer the ship and drive their engagement with your organisation can create a really powerful atmosphere where volunteers feel empowered and enabled to connect with your mission and connect with your cause. Dr. Judy Esmond, who is a volunteer guru, particularly within the Australian volunteering landscape, speaks about 3 different types of volunteers. Those who are motivated by affiliation, those who are motivated by achievement, and those who are motivated by power. Each of these groups of volunteers is in the volunteer game for a different reason. Being able to tap into what that motivation is and then enable that volunteer to use that motivation as a guiding and a driving principle for their engagement can have such a powerful effect in their connection with your cause. Breaking down those different motivations and again shifting that focus away from I need you to assist a client or provide some data entry time for us. Shifting that focus to what skills and interests can you bring into your role provides opportunities for volunteers to be thoroughly engaged with your organisation and to involve them in the work that they do at a deeper level. This might be time consuming to do, to have those individual conversations with volunteers and to provide them with the power and the autonomy to steer their engagement. But it has the potential to reduce volunteer turnover, help volunteers feel valued in their roles, and really, in the long run, contribute to a more effective volunteer program. Striving for clarity. As I mentioned earlier, we are seeing the increasing professionalisation of the volunteering sector. And while this ensures that we are offering volunteers the best support that we can by providing them with a professional environment to engage with and opportunities to perhaps develop professionally, it can also lead to quite complex recruitment processes and strategies. What this means for a volunteer is that their enthusiasm and their drive for engaging with your organisation is suddenly met with multiple hoops that they need to jump through before they actually are able to participate as a volunteer. So having a lack of flexibility around what our volunteers can and can't do or the mechanisms for their engagement can actually reduce the pool of those that are willing to participate with us as an organisation. What that means is that our pool of potential volunteers is reduced. We have less of a scope to recruit from, and perhaps it means that we're then not recruiting volunteers that meet the vision or the values that we're looking to portray as an organisation. So a few questions to consider here. Think about the processes that you have around your volunteer involvement. Are they easily accessible for volunteers from all walks of life? Or are they quite restricting? Do your recruitment, induction, and management processes enable volunteers to clearly understand what is expected of them? And does it set this out from the get-go? There are a variety of tools and resources available to provide clarity for yourselves as volunteer managers and volunteer involving organisations, and to assist you to drill down those processes to what is or what are the key aspects that need to be included. The National Standards for Volunteer Involvement is a fantastic tool to guide the development or the revision of volunteer processes. And the Way to Go toolkit is also a great mechanism for, again, reviewing and reflecting on the processes and the frameworks that you have in place for engaging volunteers. There are also resources out there to assist you in perhaps diversifying your volunteer engagement strategy. A fantastic resource includes Building Inclusive Volunteering, which was developed by ACT Volunteering and can be found and accessed through their website. And that document is really there to provide some food for thought and some prompting around how you can ensure that your volunteer recruitment and engagement strategies are inclusive and accessible to volunteers from a diverse range of backgrounds. So strive for clarity in your processes and ensure that your volunteers are able to easily understand and access the way that you're engaging with them. Investing in your volunteers. What do you do regularly to invest in your volunteers? Do you have a budget line item for volunteer engagement that might be spent on recognition events or professional development opportunity? I think this question in particular is a really interesting one to ask. We're all aware of how resource poor the community services sector are, and I'm sure that many of you as volunteer managers are working on limited funds and limited resources. But providing an option for funds to be spent on your volunteers and investing in their skills and their talents can be such a valuable way of strengthening your program. It creates really positive word of mouth for future potential volunteers, and it also keeps your volunteers around for a lot longer, again, potentially reducing your turnover and reducing your costs in the long run. Investing in your volunteers can be such a powerful way of, again, ensuring that they feel empowered in their roles. One of the aspects that our team here at LEAP does, and one of the services that we provide, is training for volunteers on a range of different topics. We look at effective inductions that provide volunteers with a really thorough understanding of their rights and responsibilities. We look at work health safety, and we also run training programs on accidental counselling and self-care. So what we find in engaging with volunteers throughout these training programs is that not only are volunteers given the opportunity to develop skills that are really vital to their roles, but bringing volunteers together to complete that training in a really social environment actually meets their needs to develop social networks, develop connections, and again, feel like a really valued member of their team. So providing those opportunities for volunteers to develop skills in areas that are of interest to them or areas that are vital to their roles, and to do so in a really inviting and socially stimulating environment, benefits your volunteers and ensures that they feel valued and supported to fulfill their roles. So perhaps consider some of the ways that you might be able to invest in your volunteers or advocate to management to provide those resources and those funds to ensure that you're given the opportunity to do that. Step 5, getting organised and seeking support. Any one of our team members in the Volunteer Solutions team will tell you that process has been a buzzword for me over the work that we've been doing over the last few months. And I think whether you're working with a handful of volunteers or a much larger pool, having systems in place to organise what you're doing can really take a lot of the pressure off and save you time in the long run as well. And that's especially true when we start thinking about that shift towards bringing our volunteers front and centre in what we do and asking those questions around how they like to be engaged and how they like to be rewarded and thanked. If we're working with 30, 40, 50, 100 volunteers and asking those questions 30, 40, 50 or 100 times, then we need to ensure that we've got a way to store that information and really accurately track the way that we want to engage with each of our volunteers. So think about how you might collect and store some of that information and look at what resources are out there to assist you to do that. There are numerous electronic databases that are out there that are targeted at volunteer management. CVCRM, Victor and Salesforce are just a few. So consider perhaps doing a little bit of research around what systems and programs you could engage and speak with other volunteer managers about how they store their data and how they organise their volunteer programs as well. As I'm sure we can all attest to, the volunteer sector is an under-resourced one. So draw on the support of fellow volunteer managers to share new ways of doing things. I think that if we can collectively push the envelope and try new ways of working and new ways of engaging volunteers, then we can only serve to strengthen the volunteering sector as a whole. Finally, step 6, review, revise, and reevaluate. If I have communicated one message this morning, then I hope that it is that the volunteer space is changing and that we as volunteer management professionals need to change with it. I think that a really key component of that is ensuring that we are building resilient volunteering programs and consistently reviewing and evaluating the ways that we're working. Think about how you measure the impact of your volunteering program. What are the goals that you're hoping to achieve through your volunteer involvement? And how have your volunteers contributed to these goals? Set out some strategic objectives for how you want volunteers to be engaging with your program and put some timelines in place for regular reviews and communication. Again, at this point, I would stress looking beyond the numbers and bringing in that really powerful qualitative data. Those stories about the emotional human connections that our volunteers drive and facilitate within our community is so incredibly valuable and provides such a great engagement tool for volunteers to really connect with your mission and vision as an organisation. And again, if we're bringing our volunteers to the front and centre of what we do and ensuring that we are truly and openly valuing volunteering, then it's important that we involve our volunteers throughout this process. The more that you're able to hear from your volunteers, to gain that feedback from them about how they're working, how they'd like to be consulted, what they're seeing when they're completing their roles in the community. The more you're able to pull that feedback into your evaluations, then you're going to be able to ensure that your approach is well-rounded, and you're going to be able to ensure that your organisation is building up really strong frameworks to ensure the sustainability of your volunteering program. Now, I did want to sneak in one lucky last tip, and I think this is something that we're all aware of as volunteer managers and coordinators, but something that I don't think we spend enough time reflecting on. Recognise and reward our volunteers consistently and often. Rewarding and recognising our volunteers is such a powerful tool and such a key component of why our volunteers come back day after day. Judy Esmond, to quote her again, speaks about the fact that whilst volunteers don't necessarily ask for recognition or ask to be thanked, studies show that if they don't feel valued, then they won't stay. They'll look for other avenues to share their skills and their time and their resources. So providing consistent and genuine feedback about the work that they're doing and framing that in a really positive way that values their contribution is such a powerful tool and such a great way for ensuring that they stay committed and engaged with your organisation and with the work that you're doing. So that does bring us to the end of my thoughts and my perspectives that I wanted to share with you today. To recap briefly, we've looked at those 6 plus 1 processes or steps to building successful volunteer management. And I think at the heart of each of those steps is really, as I said, bringing volunteers into the forefront of the way that we work and really focusing on truly and openly valuing volunteering throughout our whole organisation. So I will take a moment here, or a few moments, to answer some questions that might have popped up. My contact address, my email address is on the screen there as well. So if you do have any further questions or would like to get in touch with us about some of the work that we do, please feel free to shoot me an email and say hi. So we have had a few questions come throughout our conversation this morning. A question from someone listening in is digging deeper into that reward and recognition. What are some strategies and how can we go about recognising and rewarding our volunteers? I think that when we're thinking about reward and recognition, it's really important to, again, think about what a volunteer is really going to value. We can't take a one-size-fits-all approach to reward and recognition, because whilst some of our volunteers might really enjoy, say, going out for a social morning tea and spending some time together as a group, other volunteers might not find that stimulating or might not find that motivating. So what we want to do when we're rewarding and recognising our volunteers is connect that reward and recognition to the reasons why they're volunteering with us in the first place. Again, reflect on those three groups of volunteers that Judy Esmond speaks about. Those motivated by affiliation, those motivated by achievement, and those motivated by power. A volunteer who is motivated by affiliation is going to be someone that thrives through social connection. So rewards that facilitate that are going to be really meaningful and really valued by a volunteer that's motivated by affiliation. Volunteers that are motivated by achievement are going to look for the impact in the work that they do. They're going to want to see the results or what they've achieved throughout their volunteering role. So a reward or recognition for a volunteer motivated by achievement might be putting together a summary of all of the things they've accomplished during their time with you and presenting that to them. If we think about volunteers that are motivated by power, these are the volunteers that really want to see their name up in lights. They want to be recognised and thanked for the work that they do at all levels of the organisation. And they're really looking to develop or progress in the work that they're doing as a volunteer. So providing opportunities for a volunteer motivated by power to take up leadership roles or to be thanked by senior management can be a really great way of recognising that is what motivates and that is what drives them. And for a volunteer that's motivated by power, then some of those strategies are going to be really rewarding and valued by them. So when we think about recognising, rewarding our volunteers, again, I'd encourage you to reflect on what is that particular volunteer going to find meaningful, and also think about doing volunteer recognition more consistently as well. So it's not just something that happens during National Volunteers Week or during our annual Christmas party. It's something that we do on a regular basis. Another question, again, around the recognition of volunteers is the role that social media might play in that. So is social media effective for recognising and rewarding volunteers, and is recognition through social media appropriate for all volunteers? In answer to that, again, I would suggest that some volunteers might enjoy being thanked in a public platform like a social media page, whereas other volunteers might not. So look at associating, again, what a volunteer would find really valuable with the strategies you use to recognise and thank them. I think that social media can be a really great way of recognising and thanking volunteers. I think that it really publicly demonstrates and displays the impact that our volunteers are having within our community. And it can be a great way of sharing those stories on a more public platform. So I would encourage you to look at ways that you could be using social media to share stories about what your volunteers are achieving and to really make the most of the impact that they're having within the community. And finally, and this might be the question to end on, is how can LEAP be supporting you as volunteer managers and volunteer involving organisations? So, as I've mentioned throughout this morning's webinar, here at LEAP we run a range of volunteer training packages which we are more than happy to share and deliver for volunteer groups across Sydney. So if you're looking to provide some training and professional development for your volunteers, then we would be more than happy to provide some assistance in that sense. And all of our training packages are able to be tailored to the needs of your volunteer group. We also work to promote volunteering in a more general sense. So what that means is we get out into communities, talk to people about volunteering, and hopefully bring them on board and assist volunteers to find roles that are really meaningful for them. So if you'd like us to be able to list any potential volunteering opportunities you have available or assist you to recruit volunteers, again, that's an area that we would be more than happy to assist with. And finally, one of the other pillars or the roles that we provide is that capacity building and support for you as volunteer managers and volunteer involving organisations. We do run regular forums, so please keep an eye out on our website for when they happen, as they are free to attend. But if you would like some specific guidance on an issue or a challenge that you might be facing, or you would just like some support to strengthen your volunteering processes or frameworks, then again, please get in touch. We would be more than happy to assist you with that and to have a conversation about how we can work together to ensure that you are running those knockout volunteer programs. So thank you very much to everyone that has taken part this morning and joined me throughout this webinar. As I mentioned, we will make this available online with our white paper and that infographic around those 6+1 or really 7 steps to volunteer management success. So I will close our webinar there and wrap up. Again, thank you very much. Please feel free to contact me if you have any questions or would like to speak further about how LEAP can be supporting you to strengthen your volunteering program. And I wish you all the best in engaging, supporting, and working with your volunteers who I'm sure do such fabulous work in the community. Thank you very much.